lot of energy that's going to go into streamlining the process here in this next year or so. We'll be trying to get at validating those kinds of numbers as we move forward in the future. And certainly crop idling. For various reasons, the department, State Water Board, Food and Ag are looking at remote sensing to try to use kind of other technologies so we can get a better idea and more in real time to the extent possible on keeping track of what is actually going on in the field. So we have our first set of satellite data coming in this last week. It looks like it's going to be pretty good for a number of different reasons, whether that's curtailments or just validating some of our field work in a broad regional area. And of course, we're looking at keying up our key resources in our field offices to be able to go out and provide the information so our staff here in program can make those decisions and move those applications forward. There we go. So the long-term approach. So we got a lot on our plate here in a short period of time, but we also want to be taking the lessons we learned, as I said, and moving forward into the future. And so that's continuing to engage you. And so I want to encourage you to give us your ideas, comments today. That's a really important part of this process. We need to learn our process. We need to use our new tools. Going back to 1999, what came up for me a little bit is web resources. The ability to use remote sensing, the internet, email, all this, photo on our phone when we're in our field to collect information almost in real time. All those things help us expedite this process. So how we include that technology into our decision-making process and how we make field inspections go faster and document, for neighbors that are having trouble. All those things are in play and they really take advantage of some of the tools that we're developing in the department. And I think part of it too is transparency. So making sure that we're working not only buyers and sellers, but the other agencies, but also the NGOs and other stakeholders. To the extent that we're all on the same page and we kind of can see things fluxing and moving around and then we're all in the know, I think the easier this process is going to be and people are more comfortable in working on some of the more tougher things as we move forward. I think a lot of this is really looking at how we address our technical issues, our operational issues, and then of course our administrative issues. So there's a number of areas that we want to be sensitive to. Just using georeference databases looking in the future, for me, is huge. Like we do this in flood emergency operations now, and moving that into other fields of the department really help manage, again, the information so that we can make critical decisions much quicker. Part of that is the contracting process. We were on a coordination call the other night and somebody said, hey, can I get a copy of that draft agreement? And so that was passed out so they can kind of see it, they see how it all fits in. Again, that takes, I think, the edge off of the unknown. We have heard some positive feedback from that, and those are the kind of things that I view as kind of setting expectations out there so that we can kind of work through the administrative process as fast as we can. I think part of this is also said by both State Board and our staff. It's really important to really validate what we're doing. I think that builds trust within our community, it builds trust with the agencies, and certainly with our other stakeholders. So moving through the verification process and using new technology and having the discussion where things sometimes are difficult is important to have. So I think we want to make sure that, again, we have the open door, and again, today is kind of that one of those opportunities to make sure that we hear from you on that. We're better at this. I'm obviously pretty good with this. I think one of the things we want to make sure is that we're really also looking at some of the impacts in the long term. So for me, the environmental consequences, the impact on direct or indirect need to be on the table. And so working through that process again, collecting the information and processing and pushing that out is really important. One of the things that's also coming up, and I think we've already seen a couple opportunities this year, is really how do you line up water transfers with other potential benefits. We've seen some transfers happen now that can benefit some fish flows when we really don't have a lot of water, and I see that that's something that we need to keep on our screen to the extent that we can organize and make some adjustments whether that's in releases, exports, and storage, to look for those opportunities where if there can be an environmental benefit, especially for moving fish around either downstream or out of the way. I think it adds a lot of value to that. I think, taken from my flood side of my day job, really improve information management is key for, at least for me, to be able to make decisions and add that transparency. So again, that gets back to how we manage our system information, whether it's state water project operations, how we deal with transfer information, how we move that around the agencies, but also to our buyers and sellers and other stakeholders. But really, how do we push this forward? And we do that, I believe, through technology and then having access to that information. So then I got our water transfers website that I would encourage you to check out. And again, we have the brochure in the back. So with that, I will unhook a monitor, right?
So while Bill is unhooking the monitor, I'll remind people that you have a speaker card. Just hold it up. I'll uncollect it. Our first speaker is going to be the California Economic Summit. As soon as we clear the way, so they can put their computer here. So are there any other cards for me?
I don't need to look everything up.
Oh, you don't?
No, I just needed the place with things. Good morning. I think the presentations we've just heard were interesting and informative, and I want to talk about a process that I've been through under the last couple of years that offers the opportunity to maybe provide fresh eyes on some problems that not only are going to challenge California this year during an intractable drought, but likely in the future. Over the last 2 years, I was a co-producer of the California Economic Summit, which was a regions-driven process to understand regional priorities that impacted the state. In 2012, we had 14 regional forums all over California. We had 16 in 2013, and they are nonpartisan. We have an intense regional focus, and we focus on something we call the 3 E's: the economy, the environment, and social equity. So we have driven consensus among all of the thousands of participants in these regional forums around areas like infrastructure, workforce, innovation, capital, advancing manufacturing, but also relevant to today on regulations. So in this process, as we identify these areas where we focus on what we can agree on, not what we disagree on, we have put together action teams. And so I have been part of the regulations action team, particularly this year, when we were looking at things that state agencies could do perhaps without new legislation, and opportunities to really help our process. So we very quickly decided to focus on the streamlining water transfers and also on administrative solutions to CEQA, which of course is part of what's addressed in the water transfer. We make a commitment every time that we don't want to impact the intent of current law, nor of our state's commitment to very high environmental standards, but to find productive ways to do real streamlining. So what we have proposed this year in our regulations action team is that we will assemble SOAR teams, S-O-A-R, streamline our agency regulations, and we will provide people who are subject matter experts or management experts who would be willing to come in and work pro bono with agency leadership as well as with the employees who are charged with implementing regulations, with the goal of making regulatory processes, in this case water transfers, simpler, faster, and more predictable. So we have some recommendations to propose today, and we are willing to work with you in any way possible to implement these, or perhaps other ideas that we might come up with in discussions together. We've met with an awful lot of people, legislative leadership on water, like Senator Fran Pavley, as well as executive people, including government operations and an organization I work with a lot, GoBiz. And so we ask that you would accept our written submittal as part of the record today. And just so you know, among the group of experts that we have that have been willing to contribute time to this process are the person who is part of this group presentation, Quay Hayes, who is the founder and CEO of a company called GROW Holdings, and he is the leader of the Regulations Action Team. GROW stands for Green, Renewable, Organic, and Water, and he is doing a phenomenal project in Kings County on 13,000 acres, an area of high unemployment in California. Very exciting, sustainable live, work, play community. And I think it's a place that will benefit in Kings County from this kind of visionary work. We also have Michael Patrick George, who's the Managing Director of Public Finance for Wedbush Securities, but also formerly CEO of Western Water Company. Dale Melville, Principal in charge of Provost and Richard, but also a water district manager, a smaller water district in Kings County. Jennifer Hernandez, who's a partner in Holland and Knight. Her license plate says Sequa Nerd, so you know what she's all about. But really responsible for Holland and Knight's West Coast land use and environmental law practice. And me, Julie Meyer-Wright. I'm a strategic advisor at Collaborative Economics, consultant to the California Council on Science and Technology, which itself has done another water report on a science and tech roadmap, and formerly California Secretary of Trade and Commerce. So I'm here today to commit to you that we are willing to work with you pro bono on what we think is a very real opportunity to streamline water transfers. We really do know it's a time for action. So I'd like to turn the podium over to Quay Hayes, who's going to present the SOAR team's recommendations. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. And we want to let you know how much we appreciate the opportunity to share our ideas with you today. And we appreciate the culture of the water agencies involved, that they are looking to improve the process for the users, for the agencies, and for the environment. 2 quick seconds on what we're doing with the Regulatory Reform Group. Here are the 70 state agencies in the executive branch of the California government. Here under 13 cabinet secretaries, currently under 10, with 1 more added, government ops. And the idea is, over the past 20 years, our legislators have written about 60,000 new bills. And over time, that develops a regulatory creep that creates sometimes confusion, confliction, and other friction in the process of getting things done. And so what our intent is to work within the existing laws, not touch legislation, and not in any way undermine our environmental protections, and help these processes or agencies figure out if there might be a better way. And we will bring in experts in certain areas, and we will make our recommendations to the agency, and very smart people have made recommendations before, like the 2002 water streamlining recommendations. What we're going to do is take it a step farther, and in conjunction with McKinsey, we will provide management experts or turnaround experts to go in pro bono to the agency or as part of the process to help transition into a best practices method for process. And then after that, we want to set up an accountability mechanism. So we're setting up a Yelp-type website for state agencies. So if people want to go in and they want to know how to go through the application process, or they want to rate customer service, or they want to make recommendations on a process or to an agency, they'll be able to do that, and others will be able to look on it, and hopefully the user will be able to benefit and the agency will be able to benefit. So we set about to focus on 2 pilot programs, and with the May 2003 declaration from the governor, which states the governor's executive order directs the State Water Resource Control Board and the Department of Water Resources to expedite the review and processing of voluntary transfers of water and water rights consistent with current law. We thought, okay, that's perfect for us. So we interviewed many people that had practical experience and were in the water industry, from legal experts to water finance people to water district managers, put together a small group that were co-led by these people who Julie mentioned. And our mission in this was, our focus was to streamline the water transfer process by reducing uncertainty and delays due to unnecessary redundancies and providing more water into the system while adhering to current laws, regulations, and environmental protections. So after about 9 months of looking into the process, we came up with 5 recommendations. And I've given recommendations to Kathy and Barbara and Jerry and Tom, and we met with Wade Crowfoot and Senator Fran Pavley and others. I'm going to briefly walk you through them, but there's more detail available to anybody who would like it. Number one is to, from a ministerial process, and I heard Chris talking about it today, we want to streamline and template applications and contracts. And that's been done to a degree, but we feel that it can be taken farther so that for the standard transfers, which make up the majority of the annual transfers, it's something that's easy to fill out and easy to process, and define timeframes for the responses. And both of these go towards trying to remove the uncertainties, and you guys have already made steps in that direction, which we applaud. Number two, and there are others in that area, but you get the gist of it. Number two, we want to review the process for contractor-to-contractor transfers, and these are basically south to delta transfers and annual transfers, short-term transfers. And currently, the process is you seek approval from DWR if you're a state contractor, or USBR if you're CVP. After that process, where they have to make their findings, then you submit to the State Water Resource Control Board that conducts essentially a duplicative review, and I'm just talking about the majority of the transfers, which are standard transfers. The vast majority of these are approved, 95% or maybe more. The problem with them is you don't know if it's going to take 1 month or 6 months or sometimes longer. And with good water management practices, we need to know on a sooner and quicker basis. So what we're proposing and what we set up for everybody is a purpose, a background, our proposal, the benefits, and the authorization required. So for this one, one thought is the Water Board would delegate DWR its notice, review, and approval authority under 1725. So 1810 and 1725 would still be reviewed, would still be respected. A public review period would still be respected. And any controversial transfer that falls kind of outside the box would still then be recalled and reviewed by the Water Board. So, but this way cuts down on the typical, usual agency redundancy. And this proposal could be carried out by either executive order or by approval of the delegation by resolution of the board and acceptance by DWR, and no legislative action would be required. And this kind of delegation could be effective immediately. Our third proposal is to consolidate place of use, something that's been talked about for many years and was addressed in the 2002 recommendations. And it's simply to remove the artificial barrier between CVP users and state water project users. They're both very large places of use, and I think everyone in the room knows about how that works, so I'm not going to go into that detail. But a transfer between willing beneficial project contractors can take 6 months. And many of these transfers have already been vetted. So we suggest that the two projects jointly petition the Water Board to unify, merge, or consolidate the two places of use. And we have outlined the benefits and the authorization required, and we need the cooperation of really all three agencies to be able to do that. Another thing that we think is very important, so those two are, we think, low impact, high value ways to work within the restraints that we have that would affect a majority of the transfers that happen in the system. Number 4, we believe that we need to maximize the water in the system, and one way to do that is look at the water storage situation. Yes, it does have something to do with transfers, and we're talking today about transfers. And the reason it does is because we all know right now that transfers aren't being processed because there's no water to transfer, or a very minimum amount of water to transfer. So the state has looked at 53 locations for water reservoirs, surface storage. Focus has been on 4 of them. Tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, have been spent over the last couple decades on these 4. And we think that some have value, some don't. We're not saying commission all 4. We're saying let's fish or cut bait. Let's figure out if there are non-starters in some of these. And if so, let's look at alternative ways to add capacity. We know that there's discussion to increase flow, reduce water storage so that we can fill the rivers, and we support that. However, we think that if we're able to increase storage capacity, we wouldn't run into years like we have now that can have devastating economic and environmental impacts. And I know that none of us in the room want that. Another way to look at it outside the box, and this is something that Senator Pavley is very interested in, is in 2009, some folks from Berkeley did a study of the existing reservoirs to determine the settlement water displacement. And so we don't know that it's particularly accurate, but if it's close, potentially 40% of our water storage capacity has been displaced by sediment over the years. Maybe in some of these strategic locations it makes sense to look at removing the sediment. How do you do it? We don't know. What will it cost? We don't know. But we do think that it makes sense to look at it. So the water storage is this three-pronged approach. We do have financial numbers of building, for instance, Los Vaqueros. Apparently it's gone through the permitting process. I believe in 2009 it was deemed to cost $350 an acre foot, which at the time didn't seem to make economic sense. We're living in a new day, so maybe that does make economic sense now. So we suggest that we addressed some issues in regard to groundwater storage with Senate Bill 1168 coming out of committee. We feel that it's time to discuss that. There are a lot of blanks to fill in on 1168, and we just want to make sure that groundwater storage and recovery is considered a beneficial use, and there's no, it's not deemed relinquishment of any rights. And responsible maintenance of the facilities, 800,000 acre-feet stuck in Oroville Dam for a couple years because of 2 faulty valves. We know that work is being done to relieve that situation, and it is a complex situation, but we use that as an example. We've got to make sure that the existing system is maintained. And our fifth and final recommendation is an emergency action to permit reverse operation of the California aqueduct for banked groundwater delivery. But we note last Friday, and we support the governor's executive order with a CEQA exemption for that. Hopefully it won't have to be done too much this year if we get 5%. Maybe that will reduce the need significantly to pull out of Kern County and put it back into the system. If we had had that 800,000 acre-feet out of Oroville, that would allow for 20% allocation for the state water, which would have made a lot of difference to a lot of people. So we are very respectful of the agencies, of what they do, and we think they've done a remarkable job. And our intent is simply to try to help in any way we can as very interested third-party outsiders, bring whatever expertise we can to bear, and help politically, economically, thoughtfully, whatever we can do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. Obviously, there's a lot more thought that went into that than your average set of comments of someone standing up. So thank you very much for summarizing all the work that you've done. We'll be certainly looking at the report that you've provided us. Thank you. Did anyone else want to speak? Any other parts of our process that you had thoughts on? No? Not today? Okay, well, if that is the case, nothing from you? Boy, I don't know, we've stunned people into quietness that aren't normally quiet. It's very unusual. Okay, if there are no more comments, then I want to thank you all for coming. I thank you for sharing your ideas. Obviously, if you have ideas later after this presentation, please let us know. We'd be very interested in hearing them. Thank you.